Good morning. Today I'm going to cover some settings, tips, and tricks to improve your visual clarity as well as quality of life in the Slormancer. Alright, we are now on the gameplay settings menu, and I'm going to start with the most important setting right away. This one right here, auto pick up materials. This was off by default in my game. Let me show you what that actually means. Now, I've got a ton of stuff on the ground here, and I would have to manually press E to pick up these fragments without this setting. Now watch what happens if I turn it on. They just get vacuumed into the character. Easy as that. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention, there is one really strong legendary effect that is just massive for quality of life. As you can see, there's a bunch of loot on the ground here, and it's not getting picked up unless I get really close to it. But what I can do is I can equip the Midos collector bracers. Increased gold, slormite, slormaline, slormandrite, fragments, and reapersmith spirits collection radius. Now that you mention it, I don't think I've ever seen reapersmith spirits on the ground, so I don't know if you have to drop those manually. Anyway, put these on, and stuff will just get pulled in from much farther away. So you don't have to walk all over the edges of the map to get the stuff. It can even pull things through walls, like this thing. There we go. Sometimes it'll pull it in before I even notice that it's there. Alright, we're back on the gameplay settings. Now, I don't quite remember what all the defaults were, but I do believe a lot of these things were just on. It displays a lot by default, and I believe camera shake was also on by default. So let me show you what your typical gameplay will look like with most, if not all, of the settings turned on. The ones that affect visual clarity. Now we're killing some monsters here. And pretty much all you can see is damage numbers all over the screen. I can't even see the monsters. Where are they? Just damage numbers. So let's go through this menu and adjust it for better visual clarity. I like to leave my hero life bar always on, as well as hero life total, because this is actually the easiest way for me to see how much life my character has. I also like to display the enemy life bars, because that's an easy way to see how much damage you're dealing without actually showing the damage numbers. So let's at least turn off display enemy life total, because we don't need that. I play with enemy debuff icons on. They're not that big, they don't take up a lot of screen real estate, and they can sometimes show you useful information. Now, hero damage, I set to never. You can also show critical only, but I prefer just not seeing hero damage there. It's not useful information, and neither is enemy damage. The combo and damage meter, you can have it only show up when you're on a streak, or never, or always. I like to leave this as always, because then I can see my DPS in the bottom right, and it doesn't consume a lot of screen real estate. Now these settings, display gold, display XP, life gain, mana gain, state texts, these are all really spammy and provide no useful information to me, so I turn them all off. Display loot names, I keep this on. I show all the loot, but I do filter it very strictly, and we'll get to that later. Hide gathered slorm is another one. That's not useful information, so we'll hide it. And I really don't like the camera shake, so I'm going to turn that off. You can also zoom out as far as 75%. This also works with the mouse wheel. You might have accidentally zoomed in or out with the mouse wheel. I did that without noticing. And then there's the active camera. Let me show you what that actually does. Now when I'm moving my mouse with active camera on, you can see that it's shifting my view to this direction of the mouse. If you don't like this, if you prefer to have your character just always in the middle, you can turn this off. And for the purpose of video recording, I like to turn this off as well, since I'm moving my mouse off screen sometimes. So now that we've decluttered the visuals a bit, let's go to the next floor and have a look at what the combat looks like now. Now I can actually see the monsters this time. And I'm not getting a ton of spam on my screen, except for my build that's already pretty spammy, but if I had the damage numbers on here, I wouldn't see anything. So this is much preferable to the alternative, for me anyway. But a lot of these settings are personal preference. I just really recommend setting them to visual clarity, though, if you actually want to see what's going on. Alright, let's also have a quick look at the settings menu. Now here you can set your target FPS, your windowed mode. I use borderless full screen for most games. You can turn off or on VSync, lock your cursor to the screen so it can't leave the window. This is good for multiple monitors if you don't want to accidentally click off screen. You have the interface text size, which is a bit weird. I guess if you're having trouble reading the small text, you can change this. You can do the same for the damage text font size, but I actually don't display this at all, so kind of irrelevant for me. There's also the option to use the pixel font, which I think, like, it gels well with the game's aesthetics, but I really don't find it that readable, so I turn that off. And this low effects setting, in my testing, it didn't change much, but I noticed that there were less effects when I was using arrow shot on the Huntress. There's like this one effect when you hit the enemy with an arrow that just doesn't display. So you could turn this off for a little bit more visual quality. Clarity, sorry. Clarity, not quality. Anyway, it's completely up to you. I don't think it changes much. We're moving on to keybinds now, and there is one really important tip in here. That being, run away from expedition is actually the same hotkey that you would use to trigger the next wave in the forge. Now, by default, this was set to L. I've rebounded to Q. You can also maybe do a mouse button, like a mouse 4. I prefer Q, though. And this will allow you to start the next wave in the Great Forge much more easily. There's a bunch of other keybinds you can change as well. I left most of these at default, I think, but it's entirely up to you. Now we're on the inventory screen, and first of all, I recommend keeping all 4 of these settings on, because this is a screen where you actually want all the extra information about the item. So reinforcement level, purity, and extra stats, and item level as well. These are all useful pieces of information that you should display in your inventory, so that you don't have to hover each item individually to see at least a little bit about it. Now, before I can talk about the Filtratron, I need to explain a couple of concepts to you. The first one is highlighted stats. You can toggle any of these stats to be highlighted, and it will affect which items are actually highlighted in your inventory, and it'll also carry over to settings in the Filtratron later. So this amulet has max life on it. I'm toggling max life, and it's getting highlight and not highlight. And then there's also pure stats. As you can see on this belt, Sarusiel's Pact, I have 1 exclamation mark next to Ancestral Strike Chance. That means it's a pure stat. And pure stats are drop only. You can't craft these normally. They will have higher values than you could possibly craft on them. And if you look 2 steps down to the armor one, that one is a pure stat with a perfect score. Or at least really close to a perfect score. Yeah, that one is actually perfect. You can also hold shift here to see the mod ranges, which is what I'm doing right now. Alright, we are ready to talk about the Filtratron itself. So I'm going to click down here. And this has 5 tabs. One for normal, magic, rare, epic, and legendary items. Let's go through the options one by one. Hide normal items unless the item has a pure stat. So that would be any pure stat, even with 1 exclamation mark. But then you can also select these sub-options to only show if that is also a highlighted stat. Remember these stats that we selected here? And has a perfect score. That would mean the triple exclamation mark ones. Now my settings are very strict because I'm in the end game, but when you're just starting out, you probably only want to do something like this. Just show the highlighted stats on the first 3 tiers, I would recommend. Just do has a highlighted stat for the first 3 tiers. Show all epics and legendaries. And make sure you actually select some useful stats on the highlight list, like max life, raw damage, armor, elemental resistance. Those are the bare minimum, I'd say, for a fresh character. And once you get a better feel for what you actually want, you can change your settings to be, well, whatever you prefer, really. You'll probably want it to be pretty strict in the endgame. In the endgame, you're basically only crafting with 3 exclamation mark pure stats. And grafting them onto the purple items from the netherworld. One last thing about the Filtratron, you can select what to do with the hidden items as well down here. I usually leave it on fragments. That just converts the item into a fragment automatically, and your character can pick it up automatically. You could also do gold if you're really struggling for gold. Or you could do nothing if you want the items to just be left on the floor for no one to ever use. I wouldn't recommend this. Turn them into either gold or fragments. Alright, this last tip is something that I didn't realize myself for a long time. Let's hit C to bring up the passive skill tree. And we can select individual skills here. But let's have a look at the specialization ones for now. Now you'll notice at the top left, there's a granted raw damage number here. Investing Slorm in any upgrade or passive, whether it's equipped or not, grants raw damage at a rate of 1 raw damage for every number of Slorm invested. Now, we can just dump all our Slorm into skills we're not using, or passives we're not using on the skills we're using, to get a bit of flat raw damage, which is actually way more effective than it seems. It gives you a lot of damage. And then another thing about this screen is only one thing can be equipped per row. So even though I've invested in these two, they're not currently active. I am getting the raw damage from them, but I'm not getting these passives that are listed here. So after you spam your Slorm into whatever you want, make sure you equip the one you actually want to use. Because it will change to the one you most recently invested into. Just equip the ones you actually want when you're done. And this even works on specializations you're not currently using. So I've fully invested in these as well. Even though I'm currently playing with this one. Now I'm gonna hit the K key to bring up the Ancestral Legacy tree. And the same principle applies here. For everything you invest into, whether it's active or not, you get a little bit of elemental damage. Now, elemental damage is probably not going to be as useful as raw damage early on, because it mostly applies to ancestral skills. Most of your normal skills in the skill tree will scale off of raw damage mainly. I actually lied. The previous tip wasn't the last one. I'll also want to mention that you can respec anything in this game for free, except for your gear. So attributes, these can be changed at will, completely for free. You can uninvest your Slorm and reinvest it, change which one is equipped. You can move your ancestral stones around, and spend your Slorm however you like in here as well. And these guys, if you want to extract all your Slorm from all your skills at the same time and start over, you can talk to Ormos. And they'll give you all your Slorm back from the skills, so you can put them wherever you like again. And for the Ancestral tree, it's Olaros. Same thing here. But it's no different from just doing it manually. You get the same amount back. Alright. Thank you for watching this video. I hope these tips help you out in some way. Now, if you have any other tips that you think I've missed, feel free to leave them in the comments so other people can find them as well. And if you have any follow-up questions about some of the tips that I gave you, feel free to leave those in the comments as well. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.